that, we are good to go. It is so good to see your face. You are in Michigan, right?
I am in Michigan, northern Michigan, close to Wisconsin.
Pretty warm up there?
No. Lots
Is
of
it
snow
snowing?
and like 34 degrees. So
Oh my
I'm jealous
goodness.
of all you in nice warm places right now.
I went for a run here in
Nice.
Dallas. It is about 70 degrees. I had my shirt
Oh,
off and it was awesome. So
so jealous.
yesterday I actually got red. I actually got a little
Uh,
bit of red. It was fantastic.
well, I was supposed to be in Florida right now, but I'm in beautiful Michigan instead. So here we are.
Yeah, awesome. Well,
Yeah,
welcome. It's so good to have you on here.
thanks.
While Casey is going to get her stuff set up, let me just set up some of the ground rules today. Well, I'll tell you where I met Casey. We were at Green Bay at the stadium maybe a year ago, is it? And we were both doing an event. I got to see her talk about nutrition and do her thing. And it was so amazing to see the way she could share, the way she could present, all the great information that she has. And so I really wanted to have her on this webinar, my second webinar. It's athlete nutrition. And this is a long time coming, and I'm really excited to share her stuff with you. She is a personal trainer just recently, right? You just got certified?
Yeah, about 6 months ago.
About 6 months ago. You have a new studio, and
Yeah.
you're a registered dietitian.
Yes.
And she has an awesome Instagram page. And so highly recommend checking out her Instagram page. All of this stuff will be in the notes that I'll send out afterwards. And so Casey, if you're ready, if you guys, if they have questions, do you want me to interrupt you or just wait till the end?
Yeah, sure. No, go ahead and interrupt me. Keep it
Okay,
informal. That's
fantastic.
fine with me. Yep, no
All right,
problem.
Casey,
Yeah.
you're on.
All right. Let's go. Oops. Hang on. Pulling up my PowerPoint here. Hang on a second. And all right. You guys see it?
You're good to go. Go ahead and hit view so that way it goes to the present. There you go.
There. Okay. Are we good to go?
Good to go. Hit
okay,
it.
Awesome. That was the thing I was most nervous for, was getting all the technology.
You did so good.
So. All right, thanks for bearing with me. Hi, everyone. My name is Casey. As James mentioned, I'm a registered dietitian and certified personal trainer. So also, as James mentioned, we met approximately a year ago in Green Bay. We were both speaking at an event put on by the Green Bay Packers. And I was speaking, he was speaking, and we just kind of, got to meet each other that way. I, unfortunately, had the first slot right after lunch. That was my speaking time that nobody really wants, right? Because everybody is just full. They've got full bellies. They're just starting to get a little tired. They're like not too excited about sitting for a lecture for the next 3 hours. So that was my spot. I went up. I was excited. I love talking about athlete nutrition, and that was my topic, talking about adolescent athlete nutrition. And I was like, okay, this went well. I did fine. Got the information out. I'm done. I can kind of relax now. There was a speaker between James and I, so I got to listen to that speaker. And then up comes James Leith to the podium, and he just, from the very second he took the microphone, just really engaged the entire audience, myself included. There was approximately 100 of us in the room, and I was totally engaged the whole time, talking or listening to him talk about athletes and parents and coaches and how we can kind of all work together to help support our athletes. So he had a wonderful presentation. I was, very impressed from the start. So I'm a huge fan of James' work. I think he has a lot of really great resources to offer. And so I'm super excited to be working with him on this project. So thank you again, James, for having me today. I appreciate it. So we're going to go ahead and just get started with athlete nutrition. So why does it matter? Hopefully you all kind of have a little bit of an understanding about nutrition and its importance in our role in keeping a healthy body, but in particular for athletes. They have really high energy needs. They have very high demands on their body in their sport and through their activity. So if they are not consuming enough fuel or the right types of fuel, their performance is going to be impacted. It's really important with our athletes that we focus on good nutrition for pre and post workout fuel. It's very essential for them to be performing at their peak. My personal interest in this, obviously I have a fitness, interest, the background experience. I'm just kind of like really interested in the fitness realm, but I'm also a parent of 3 pretty active boys. So they participate in a variety of different sports. So I not only get to do this for my work, but I also get to do it in my personal life and making sure that my kids are fueled properly and they're getting the right nutrition that they need for their needs. So moving on, we are obviously in a kind of just not great current state, right? There's a whole lot of challenges in front of us. There's a lot of uncertainty, stressful, fear, some panic going on, and a whole lot of disappointment. There's a lot of people who are just, their world has just been stopped. We've lost control out of a lot of things. Sports is one of them. We can no longer participate. We can't do these things. For the first time in 10 years as a mother, I'm looking at perhaps not being able to watch my son play baseball, which is just really sad on so many levels. And I know there's so much of that going on, a lot of disappointment. So I feel for you. I know that it's not good. It's not fun, but we're all in it together, and there's only so much that we can control. So what I encourage you to do is, it's okay to be a little sad and upset about that stuff, but try to do what you can to focus on taking care of yourself during this time. So stress relief is huge. Trying to cope with your feelings and what's going on, staying connected to your family and your friends, and as you coaches, to your athletes as well. And I know James had a discussion last week about how to try to stay virtually connected with your athletes. And I know he gave a lot of really good information, and hopefully you've got some tips that you can kind of use moving forward to help keep that connection going. But I did also want to talk about just real briefly routine and the sleep structure, staying physically active, and then of course my most of my presentation will be on nutrition. But routine is super important. Like I said, I'm a mom of 3 boys who, like, everything just halted real suddenly, and we're not certain how long this is going to continue. The longer it continues, I think the more important it is for my kids to have somewhat of a good routine at home, making sure that we have a good sleep schedule going, that we've got regular meals, and they're not just coming into the kitchen every hour and asking for more food, because it drives me crazy. It's so hard to keep them fed. But if I'm giving them more, regular meals, they're satisfied for that, 3 to 4 hours in between. So coming up with that routine, keeping them on task with their sleep, working in those studies, or that reading, or some of those educational things is really important too. Trying to keep them physically active, so we know that helps with stress, that helps with coping, it helps us stay feeling better with our bodies. So trying in a way as best you can to get them moving and keep them physically active is important. And then of course the nutritional piece is, in my book, super important too. So I'll move to my next slide, and we're going to talk about, just briefly, sports nutrition in season, because nobody is in season right now. Everyone is just, boom, done for the time being. Hopefully super temporary, we will see. But I just kind of wanted to talk about this, just to give you some information to maybe go back to in the future, and then also just to kind of, give this information to your athletes moving forward. So in season, heavy training, you're thinking about an athlete who is, has practice almost daily. They are, 2-hour practices. They're really working out pretty heavily, basically almost every single day. Right now in season, their energy needs are going to be the highest that they probably are throughout that whole year. So they are going to need lots of calories, lots of energy, lots of food. Macronutrient breakdown. I'd love to get into super detail with this today, but we kind of just don't have the time. James is providing a really good handout for afterwards that you can reference, and I'll talk a little bit more about the breakdown of the macronutrients in that resource. So, but basically your macronutrients are your carbohydrates, your protein, and your fat. And as athletes, our body's preferred source of fuel is carbohydrates. So I really do suggest the bulk of an athlete's diet, especially in this season, in this heavy training time period, to be coming from the carbohydrate foods, okay? So The next slide, I give an example. So I've got this athlete, this soccer player here. She is 17 years old. She's female. She's approximately 140 pounds. Her activity level is in season, moderate to high. So she is moving 5-6 days a week, 2-hour practices. She wants to maintain her body weight because she's at a healthy body weight currently. Her calorie needs should be between 2,600 and 3,000 calories a day. She is that physically active. She needs to replenish and refuel her body when she is working out. She is utilizing a lot of that energy. She needs to replenish that. So really high calorie needs for her, again, in this season, the most that she'll likely need to be consuming throughout that whole year. She's not going to get that if she's skipping breakfast or if she's not having regular meals and snacks. That's just a whole ton of calories that she needs to consume. So we really need to talk to this athlete about regular meals and snacks and planning appropriately for that, and making sure that she's eating on a regular basis. Sometimes for athletes who have really high needs, it's almost like a full-time job keeping them fueled. As a mom of athletes, it's a full-time job trying to make sure that they've got healthy food on hand. So, but it's possible. Okay, so this slide is super busy, and I don't want you to get lost in the everything that's going on here. I'm just gonna kind of refer to it, and then this link is also posted in that resource as well. So if you take a look at for hard training in season, this is kind of what an athlete's plate should look like. I emphasize carbohydrates as the body's preferred source of fuel, so I suggest trying to break that plate in half and getting half of that plate to be that pasta, rice, potatoes, cereal, those kinds of starchy foods. That's with that fuel for that athlete's muscle. Protein is super important. I recommend some kind of lean protein with pretty much every meal and every snack. And obviously, as a registered dietitian, I'm always trying to encourage people to eat overall healthy. So including a good variety of vegetables and fruits is important. That athlete needs some fats. More of the healthy fats are a better thing. But in order to kind of get their calorie needs met, they need to incorporate some of those fats as well. So this is just kind of a picture. Like I said, I know it's kind of busy, but you can refer back to it after the presentation. So this would be an example of that in season and that hard training athlete's plate. Okay, so off season, guess what? We're like all there right now, pretty much. But in a true off season, when you're not in that regular practice, if you've got a couple weeks in between your sports, if you're a multi-sport athlete, this is when your needs are going to vary a little bit. And it kind of depends on what your athlete's goals are going to be. So if they are off season for, kind of a weight specific sport, something like wrestling, they might want to utilize this off season to lower their calorie intake to help promote a little bit of healthy weight loss if they have some to give. In my example, you see the opposite for this athlete. And this is where I get to be the proud mom. And this is my son, Nathan. He's playing football over here, and this was last summer in the Gus Macker. So he is a multi-sport athlete. This kid plays football, he does basketball, he does baseball, and he is currently in 8th grade, so he's going to be a freshman in high school next year. So he's like my perfect little subject that I get to help reach his goals nutritionally. So this athlete is Nathan, and he is almost 15 years old. He weighs approximately 165 pounds. Right now, he is in between season. It's in between basketball, and we were supposed to be going into baseball and track. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but his focus for this time period and also into the summer leading into football is he's trying to gain weight. He wants to increase his lean body mass so he can be more functional on the football field. Bigger, faster, stronger, right? That's what a lot of athletes want to be. So we're working with him to adjust his calorie goals and get the right nutrition in so he can help support this. For Nathan, for his age, I'd suggest right around 2,600 to close to 3,000 calories a day. But for weight gain, we're trying to increase that by about 500 to try to get them to promote a little bit of that healthy weight gain. And so this is what his plate should look like, depending. Again, this is kind of for that moderate training. So backing off those carbohydrates just a little bit, but yet again, for him, the biggest emphasis would be trying to get in the calories that he needs. So not that half a plate for the grains, the starchy foods, just because he's not every day going 2 hours in football practice anymore. But we still want to make sure that he's getting in enough food. Protein for him is probably a little bit more important right now because he's in that muscle building stage. Again, fruits and veggies, super important, making sure he's getting in his healthy fats. So again, a busy slide, but you can refer to this a little bit later, just kind of gives you a good idea. Okay, moving on to the current state of social distancing, quarantines, lockdowns. Like, yuck, who would have thought we would be here right now? Certainly not me, but it is what it is. This is where we're at today. So pretty much your athletes, they're not having those opportunities to be physically active anymore. They are not allowed to go into the gym. They can't go into the lifting rooms. They can't go into the swimming pools, whatever it is. They're just can't do it right now. So majority of your athletes and, majority of all of us are moving a little bit less right now. So that's going to just lower our energy needs. We don't need to consume as much calories, as much energy because of our movement has gone down so much. Macronutrient breakdown can kind of vary a little bit too, but kind of just focusing on that. So then I go to my next example and oh, look who I found.
Where did you get that photo? Oh, that's in Green Bay.
That is Green Bay. That's the beautiful Lambeau Field. I'm a huge Packer fan. So, so I snagged this from your Instagram page, James. Sorry to toss you in. But you coaches are also kind of in the
Remember when I was 190 pounds? That's very kind of you.
Oh, okay. Well, I totally guessed, but I didn't want to offend. So, but let's just use James as an example, right? He's a coach. Normally, if he's in season, he's pretty active. He's moving on the field with his kids. He's not home all day long looking at the refrigerator, looking what's in the cupboard. He's busier. He's more active. So right now, during this state of not a whole lot going on, his energy needs are going to be fewer. Let's just say he also, maybe prior to all this, maybe was thinking that he wanted to, lose a little bit of weight. So what we do is just kind of subtract approximately 500 calories from his total needs, which are already lower based on his reduced activity level. So I'd estimate his between 2,500 and 3,000 calories a day if he wanted to maintain his current weight at his lower activity level. If he's trying to lose weight, I would subtract about 500, get him closer to about that 2,000. So kind of just depends on what kind of activity he's still able to do right now. And again, here's a busy slide, but it kind of gives you an example of what that coach's or that athlete's plate who is not as active as they used to be. And what I would suggest, and what I always suggest for weight management people, anybody who's trying to lose weight, athlete or not, is try to get half of that plate to be those non-starchy fruits and veggies, or non-starchy veggies, and then adding in some fruit. The reason being is these are very low calories. So you can consume a lot of these foods without really contributing to your calorie intake a whole lot. So half of that plate, veggies, fruits, again, more protein. For weight management, you see that pie moves just a little bit. We want to emphasize more protein, less of those starchy foods if you are trying to lose weight. You still need some healthy fats, so we still want to incorporate some of those, but again, it's just kind of more portion sized in general. So that's what that plate would look like for someone who's trying to consume a little bit less energy based on not moving as much in the current state. So I know I buzzed through all of that really quickly. We wanted to try to keep it to just like a nice brief presentation today. I am definitely open to hearing your questions, and I will happily answer them today. If it's a question that you stump me on, I promise I'll do some research and get back to you. But you certainly, the floor is open. James, if you want to open up to questions, if any came through.
Thank you so much. That was awesome. Everybody's clapping their hands.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, so she can see the comments. So if you guys want to put some comments in there about the presentation, definitely. But we do have some questions. Let's see. We've got Rich. Very interested in learning how to provide varied, nutritious foods for my picky eating athlete.
Ooh, okay. This is a really good question. And I don't know that there's like one perfect suggestion or, answer for it. But pickiness can kind of be pushed a little bit. I think it's important, especially depending on the age of the athlete. If they're pretty young yet, I still think it's important to encourage and promote them to try foods that maybe they think that they don't like. Maybe putting it into different forms. Like one example I give often is somebody's like, I don't like a lot of vegetables. Well, have you tried it in soup? Do you like cooked vegetables in soup? Because a lot of times with picky vegetable eaters, it's like they just don't like the texture. So when it's cooked down and maybe in that soup form, maybe they would eat it more. I'm a huge fan of smoothies. Like I work with those with my kids all the time. We do fruit and veggie smoothies. So that's another way that you could get a lot of that nutritious food into a different form that they would still consume. Does that help?
Fantastic. All right.
Okay.
Derek, he says, do you have, lost it. There it is. Do you have any recommendations for a practical way of accurately monitoring calorie intake?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of really good apps that are out there, and a lot of them are free to use. My favorite one that I use personally, myself when I'm tracking or if I'm working with clients, would be MyFitnessPal. So you can just go online and download the app. There is a premium version, but I don't even use it. It's not necessary.
I used MyFitnessPal for about a year when I did my show. And it was fantastic. I mean, it's to the point where you're at the grocery store and you can take a picture of the barcode and it, boom, puts it in there.
Yeah, it's very user-friendly. It gives you a whole ton of information, probably more information than most individuals would even need. But as a registered dietitian, I'm always like super excited about those numbers. But they can definitely give you a really good insight to the composition of your diet. How many calories are you consuming? How many grams of carbohydrates are you consuming? So yeah, it's a really helpful tool.
So that's MyFitnessPal. There's some comments in the questions or questions in the comments. Yeah, MyFitnessPal. It's an app. It's also a website. You can download your stuff. Even when I was a trainer, I would have some of my clients download their intake and they would just send it to me in an Excel spreadsheet, which is pretty cool. Chocolate milk after practice.
Yeah.
Myth bust for us.
It is a really great recovery beverage. After a hard workout, your body needs to repair and replenish. And we replenish by giving it good, healthy carbohydrates, and we repair by providing protein. So chocolate milk has a great combination of both of those. So you can go into a really hard workout and you come out afterwards and you pound some chocolate milk and you're immediately starting to repair and replenish, helping you get ready for that next practice the next day or that next event that you've got on your calendar. So yeah, I'm a huge fan. I would suggest a low-fat chocolate milk. It's going to help keep the calories down, and then the fat content, if it's like a whole fat milk, is going to be more of the saturated fat, which is the kind that's not necessarily good for our heart health. So
I'm all about the almond milk, the almond chocolate milk.
Oh, okay.
That's the best.
Not as much protein, James, as the dairy milk.
According to the branding, it says there's more. So, but it's cashew. But it's also, for me, I guess I should preference that I like the higher fat content.
Okay.
In that. So I'm getting
my
protein from other sources, big old pieces of steak. All right. Let's go, just on that, piggyback a little bit, nutrition post-practice, 9-year-old, 19-year-old. Is there a difference?
Sure, because their calorie needs are probably going to be pretty different. So calorie needs are going to be based on, body weight, body size, body composition, activity level. So certainly there's going to be a difference between a 9-year-old and a 19-year-old in their body weight and body size. As far as the proportion of the nutrients, I would say they're probably pretty similar. And I would still recommend carbohydrates and protein for both of those athletes, maybe just at different quantities.
All right. I got a question from Scott, who Well, I wouldn't know how to answer it. So let's see what you got. Ready? Here
Oh,
we go.
boy.
Casey.
Okay, Scott, bring it on.
Any comment for those working with prepubescent, I can never say that word right, prepubescent athletes, given their muscle glycogen storage capability? Won't be as much as post-pubescent athletes.
Oh, okay. Okay, interesting. So I suppose the size of the muscle would be reflective of its storage capabilities.
Yeah.
So I would probably lean towards fueling that younger athlete who has not fully developed their muscle mass as much as they will as they get older. I'd probably recommend fueling them more frequently.
Nice.
So
Well
they
done.
would need the regular meals and snacks to kind of help keep those carbohydrates on board.
Well done. All right. Carl says, with restricted shopping, which we're all going through right now, what would you suggest in lieu of fresh fruits and veggies? You know, if you weren't able to get those because they're really not available like they used to be for everybody. Some people they are, but what do you think?
Right. No, that's a good question. I'm running into it myself. You know, we're trying to limit our trips to the grocery store. So I'm not going every 2 to 3 days anymore. I'm trying to limit, the frequency of it. There are a lot of fresh fruits and veggies that you can get that are more shelf stable. So things like apples and oranges, those kind of last a little bit longer than if you were to buy like fresh berries or something like that. But otherwise, I am a huge fan of frozen options if you can find those. In fact, living in Michigan in the winter, I don't really have a lot of access to good, healthy, fresh produce through a lot of the winter.
Well, it was fresh. It just froze because you're in Michigan.
Well, true, right. So I buy frozen strawberries and frozen raspberries and frozen cherries and that kind of stuff. So I keep that on hand anyway. So, but I have been trying to buy more of that just so I can have that option for my kids to continue to give them the fruit that they like to eat. Canned can be okay. Canned has a little bit more added sugars to it, so I would be a little bit more cautious with that. It's also a little bit more processed, so it generally doesn't contain as much fiber. But the benefit of the frozen stuff is that it's generally frozen at its peak, so it is nutritionally superior and usually tastes better than some of the fresh stuff you would even buy that's off season. So yeah, you can.
And when you defrost fruits, you don't hold their structural integrity. So blueberries are going all over the place. Strawberries are going all over the place. I don't know. I haven't got them all over my shelf before, but so you want to throw them into like a shake, right? Like, or
a lot of times what I'll do is that when I start cooking my dinner, I'll take them out and I will just put them in a bowl and set them on the counter for like a half hour, 45 minutes. And then they kind of still are a little bit more palatable at that point, but certainly they're frozen is a great option for smoothies and things like that. I do want to say one more thing about the frozen fruit is some of it can be found with added sugars. So just take a look at that ingredients label. I try to just buy what says the fruit only. So if it's frozen strawberries, you want it on the ingredients label just to say strawberries. If it says strawberries, sugar, not a good option. Just added sugar that you don't really need.
Yeah, and you mentioned the canned foods too. There's a ton of preservatives in there. There's a reason why they stick around a while, right?
Right, but honestly, I guess in this state, like if that's your option, I mean, it's an option. It certainly isn't terrible for you.
Yeah, it reminds me of, so when I would come home from practice as a little kid, my mom would always take me to like McDonald's, or she would take me to like these different places, and it was one meal, and it was basically just replacing calories. And maybe once a week she would do that. And so I feel like nowadays, if somebody goes from practice to McDonald's and then somebody sees them, they're going to get shamed on Instagram or something. like how far away from a healthy diet is it if the kid goes to fast food once a week after practice? Like, is it going to completely throw off their chances to get a scholarship one day? Like, I say that in jest, obviously.
Right. No, I mean, definitely not. And I mean, I am very nutrition focused, and I think it's a big piece of my responsibility as a parent, but because of my background in nutrition, but my kids eat that stuff too. I mean, I'd be lying if I said that they didn't. We try to limit it, and we try to, provide it with some other healthy foods, or like, follow up with the next meal, a little bit more balanced and well-rounded. But I mean, other than right now where we're not as busy, like life is busy with 3 kids and different activities, so a lot of times we
3 kids activities, and you have to teach them now because
yeah.
they're not going to school. Like
Oh,
there's schedule's busy.
it's interesting, but no, one of their favorites is Taco Bell. So whatever, you might see me at the drive-thru at Taco
Okay,
Bell.
so Taco Bell, the vegetarian, like the
Yeah.
bean crunch wrap is
Mhm.
one of my favorite foods.
Okay.
It's so delicious. I know I probably shouldn't say that on a nutrition webinar, but it's so good.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
heard.
I would lean more towards the options with the beans and the guacamole and the,
Yeah.
tomatoes. But I mean, my kid likes the steak quesarito, which is just like, ugh.
All right. So let's see. My friend Kelly, she has a question about resources to share with the team. Kelly, we're going to put that in a handout that you'll get. So don't worry about that. And if Casey and I come up with any others, we'll definitely add to that. Let's see. What would be a great nutritional diet for a 14-year-old 140-pound girl who wants to lose some weight? Now, that's a very specific thing, but I'm sure if somebody wants to lose weight, what would be some ways that they could do that in that age range?
Okay, yeah. So you always just kind of have to be pretty careful with these young athletes, especially with girls, because we don't want it to go, beyond what we're trying to help them accomplish. Depending on the sport, a lot of these young women, young girls, are kind of already at an increased risk for that potential for either disordered eating or developing an eating disorder as they go along. So, I always approach that extremely carefully, especially with female athletes. However, depending on where their weight is at and what their goals are, I think there are certainly healthy ways to go about helping them reduce their calorie intake to get them to a healthier weight. And definitely, I would suggest trying to eliminate a lot of the simple sugars from beverages and foods that they're consuming. So like candy and soda, cookies, and some of that kind of stuff that doesn't necessarily have a lot of good nutritional quality. I mean, it's palatable and it's fine to have here and there, but if they're consuming a lot of that, to me, that would be one of the easiest ways to kind of go about that. And then I would kind of steer them more towards that light training plate, that one that we talked about, where half of that plate would be those vegetables and fruits, because again, those are healthy foods. They're nutritionally dense. They have a lot of good nutritional value to them, but they're also lower in calories. So if we kind of shift that diet to include more of those vegetables and more of those fruits, that's going to help them get what they need, but also help them to consume fewer calories, which should help promote their weight management.
Nice. What are some recommended snacks for student athletes?
Okay, so that's a great question. In the resource that James is going to provide, I did put a sample athlete menu in there. So I did include a couple of different snacks, so you can refer to that. But some of my favorites would be like Greek yogurt, fruit, and maybe like some whole grains, crackers, and a cheese stick or something like that. Nuts can be a nice nutritional snack as well. Peanut butter sandwich, chocolate milk,
Yeah.
those can all work. But if you can go fruit and veggie focused, graham crackers and peanut butter, some of those kinds of things, that would just be off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, it's good. And studies will show that whatever's out, you're going to grab more of. And so I've gone to friends' houses where they've got a bowl of peanut butter M&Ms out. It's like, well, every time I walk by that, I'm gonna grab a handful because those are delicious. But if those were put away and there was some nuts, or there was some apples, bananas, oranges, something like that, a life hack: put out what you want to eat. If you would rather eat that healthy stuff, then put that out. Don't put the candies and stuff out. Leave that for grandma. That's grandma's house. But the idea of having peanuts out and almonds out, like that just makes sense to me.
Right. I like to do that when my kids, I know they're going to be starving when they come home from school or when they come home from practice. So I'll chop up the fruit and I set it right on the counter. So you walk in, you wash your hands. If you're, starving, waiting for supper to be ready, you can snack on that fruit before you have anything. So they will. Kids and adults alike are like that. Like if it's there, I'm going to eat it. And if I'm hungry and it's a healthy choice, I don't care because I'm hungry and I'm just going to eat it. So
all right.
that's the way to do it.
Okay, let's see. As a coach, how should I eat? James, how do you eat? Okay. I got this one, Casey.
Okay, go for it. Let's hear it.
Okay, so how I eat is pretty irrelevant, but I'll just share that what I have found is that through trial and error, when I don't eat until about noon and I have a huge meal with steak and eggs and some salad and maybe some yogurt or something, that I'm pretty satiated until a snack midday or mid-afternoon and then, dinner. And that's what I have found for me. I find that when I eat early in the morning, first thing in the morning, whether I work out or not, I feel sluggish around noon. For me, again, I can't stress this enough, trial and error. I'm going to continue to eat like this until it doesn't work for me anymore. I'm a 40-year-old man. And so I can mess around with that kind of stuff. Now, when it comes to skipping breakfast for kids, Casey, I would imagine you probably don't want that to happen.
Right. Yeah. In that, what James is kind of referring to is the intermittent fasting. And I think that works really nicely for some people. And like he said, if it, give it a try, if it works for you, I think that's fine, as long as you're meeting your needs within that time window that you're doing. For kids, yeah, I probably would shy them away from that style. And simply because their calorie needs are probably going to be a lot higher. Okay. Right. So they can't eat as much at one time, like my 9-year-old, sometimes he can eat a larger portion, but he typically is eating smaller portions and has to eat more frequently. Otherwise he's uncomfortable. And I don't want to, push him to eat too much at one time and have him override that, that hunger and fullness cues. So for younger children, I would definitely encourage, 3 meals a day plus a couple snacks, just because they have to eat such small portions at a time.
Yeah, I remember as a kid, I could down an entire pizza. Now I have a milkshake from In-N-Out Burger and my butt jiggles for a week. So I have to be very careful about what I eat because I just do not burn it the way I used to. And the yoga studio is closed. So, yeah. All right, let's see. A question from Sean. It says 5 smaller meals, ?
Yeah, I think sometimes that can work. 5 to 6 smaller meals versus larger meals. Maybe for kids who are real busy throughout the day, or maybe they have multiple practices a day, because the timing of that food sitting in that belly is really important too. Yeah, we want to make sure that they're meeting their needs and getting what they want, including what they need. But maybe the timing of their practices doesn't allow them to eat so much food at one time. So maybe it's a matter of breaking it into smaller amounts and eating more frequently throughout the day. Again, it might be more of a personal preference there. If that's how you meet your needs, I think that's fine. The only exception I ever really tell people that is if they're diabetic, because then they're just kind of continuing to push that blood sugar up in between their eating meals. So it might not be the best pattern for someone who has diabetes. But other than that, I think if it works for somebody, I think that's great.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. Oh, this is a good one. We have athletes play volleyball tournaments, several matches in one day. What would you just suggest during that day? I remember, you could go to the snack bar and get Snickers and you can get all this other stuff. But in order to sustain energy in these multiple competitions in one day, how should they eat maybe in the beginning and then throughout the day to not feel too sluggish?
Okay, this is a great question. So
Frito boats. I'm assuming Frito boats are out because those were my favorites.
We call them walking tacos in Michigan and Wisconsin. Okay, so the question was, if someone has a tournament where they have multiple times that they're competing throughout the day, and how do they stay fueled properly? Is that what I heard?
Yeah. How do you stay? I think I added to it a little bit, but how do you stay at peak energy levels throughout the day eating? Because if you have a bit midway through the day, you go to Chipotle and you get a food baby right here, and you're probably not going to be digging in the volleyball very good. So what would be some good ways to sustain energy?
Yeah. So if you're in that realm, and so what I will say is everyone is individualized. So some people's bellies can handle a whole gut bomb of food 30 minutes before they go on the field. Most people can't, but some people can do that. So it's very individualized. You have to kind of figure out what works best for you as far as the timing before your activity. But generally, the closer you get to your activity, the more focused on carbohydrates we want that to be, because those carbohydrates break down pretty quickly and get digested more quickly compared to protein and fat that sit in your stomach longer. So if you have an all-day tournament and you've got multiple times that you're competing, you probably want to stay away from real high-fat, high-protein foods. And focus more on those carbohydrate things. So things like the crackers or the fruit, or, maybe you have a little bit of that chocolate milk, but not a whole ton of it. And you kind of wait a little while before that next activity. So does that help? More carbohydrate based foods if you're having to eat frequently throughout that day.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good.
And
all right. Derek says thoughts on plant versus animal based protein sources. I've had the Impossible Burger. Not at the fast food one. I had it. I was with the Bulls. We had some Impossible meat, and it was amazing. Tasted well. And then my buddy Will called me up the other day, and he said, "Have you ever looked at the ingredients?" And I said, "Don't ruin this for me, man. Don't ruin this for me." So, what are your thoughts on plant-based protein versus the regular, meat protein?
Sure. So that's a really good question, and I think it kind of depends on the person's preference and their purpose behind why. If they have a preference for plant-based proteins, I think that they can be worked into a healthy athlete diet, no problem. I think that maybe with the plant-based proteins, they're going to be lower in fat. They're not going to have that saturated fat content typically, which is good for our overall health and for heart health. If someone is consuming more of an animal-based protein diet, I would suggest just the leaner cuts of the beef and the pork and the chicken without the skin, and the low-fat Greek yogurt compared to the full-fat or the low-fat milk, that kind of thing. So I think if I were to tell somebody maybe what the best method was for, and if they weren't against eating animal proteins, I would probably say it's going to be a little easier for you to get the nutrients that you need from an animal-based protein diet, but I would lean you towards the leaner kinds. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. That's good. Now, based off of that, Monica asks, what if you're vegan or vegetarian?
Yeah, so like I said, you can definitely meet your needs. It probably is just going to require a lot more effort and planning on your part, because you're going to have to think a little bit more ahead of time about having some of these vegan or plant-based options available to you. And someone can consume a vegan diet and it can be crappy. Like, you can consume a vegan diet and not eat healthy foods, just not animal-based foods. So just because you're eating vegan doesn't necessarily make it healthy, but there is certainly a healthy way to go about it. Good plant-based proteins would be like nuts and seeds and beans and some of your soy-based products. So you would probably need to include those on a regular basis, pretty frequently throughout the day to get the needs of the protein that you have. So
that's good.
It certainly can be done. Mm-hmm.
Good. Pre-event meal for an hour and a half event or practice. What would be a good one, and when should they eat it?
Okay. So you have an hour and a half event or practice, and you're wondering what you should eat prior to?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it kind of depends on that length of time before that window again. Okay. So like 2 hours before, I would say maybe you could have like a sandwich, maybe have some lean protein on the sandwich, a couple slices of bread, maybe toss some pretzels in with it, and maybe like 8 ounces of milk or something like that. Obviously it's not a huge meal, but you want to try to limit the amount of food that needs to be digested before that practice. The closer that you get to that event, again, you would want to focus on mostly the carbohydrates from that meal. So maybe I wouldn't put as much meat on that sandwich, or maybe I would keep the cheese off of it because cheese has more fat, so it's going to sit in my stomach a little bit longer.
I always thought like dairy was kind of it always hurt my stomach or made me feel bad before an event or like a practice or something.
Okay. Yeah. So that's an individual, kind of awareness.
It's trial and error. There's really no set thing for anybody.
Right. Like I said, what works really well for one person might not work really well for another. And so it is that trial and error. And that's when you can use that practice to kind of practice with your belly stuff too. I would highly discourage someone from doing something on game day or competition day that is brand new to their system, because you don't know what's going to happen, and you may have big time belly issues and it could really affect your performance. So I tell this to like runners, race day, practice what you're going to consume before that race, before you get to race day, and don't try anything new. Even if your best friend says, oh, you got to try this, it works really well for me, be very careful with that, because it could be disastrous for you. You could be in the porta potty during the whole race. So
yeah, I found out that if I ever wanted to throw up 10 minutes into wrestling practice, egg muffin. That was it.
Don't do that again.
All right, let's see. Best drinks for athletes: water, Gatorade. If they're not milk drinkers, like what would be some good drinks for them?
Yeah, and I didn't even touch on hydration in my talk. So definitely athletes need to be hydrating regularly throughout the day. I always encourage athletes to constantly have a water bottle with them, drink water first thing in the morning, bring it with them to their school and their practice, constantly drinking that water, because often depending on their environmental circumstances, they could be sweating a lot, and so they need to replenish that. So water would be number one. And then I think there is a good time and place for sports beverages. And it's going to be if that athlete is losing a lot of sweat, losing a lot of electrolytes. Yeah. And if they potentially haven't had the opportunity to eat something to fuel before, that liquid sports beverage is going to be a lot easier digested than if they were to eat food. So if you only have like a 30 to 45 minute window and you're like, ooh, I really haven't had enough time to eat a meal, maybe try, 8 ounces of a Gatorade before you go into that practice or that competition, just to kind of give your body some readily available carbohydrates.
It's fantastic. All right, we have a few more. Are you good? You good on time?
I could talk all day on this.
Right. Why you're here. Okay. When would you, let's see, this is an anonymous person. Come on, put your name in there. Let's go. What would you recommend parents need to consult with a nutritionist if their children do use sports? Or when would you recommend?
When would you recommend to consult?
Yeah.
I wish every athlete would have the opportunity to consult with a registered dietitian. I think we could provide some good guidance and some good input. We would focus in on what their goals are and how can we kind of shape your intake to help support that. So if there's an opportunity for an athlete to do that, I think they should take it. If there's concerns about, the athlete maybe losing too much weight, or if they're running into repeated injuries or extreme fatigue or something like that, I would probably recommend getting them into a registered dietitian to kind of evaluate their overall intake and are they consuming enough, and maybe they can give them some guidance on different, strategies that they can use to help, get that improved.
Yeah, because it might not even be their food. Might just be like a thyroid thing or some kind of
medically evaluated for sure if they're having serious issues like that, for sure.
Good stuff. Okay, let's see. Maggie says, can you talk about feeding athletes that are having 2-a-day practices lasting 2 hours each time? Swimmers specifically, if that makes a difference, she says.
Okay, so that would be that in-season, hard, heavy training plate that we looked at in the presentation. They want to definitely have a good amount of their calories, probably 50 to 55% or more, coming from carbohydrates. And their calorie intake during that time is going to be extremely high. So they need to focus on fueling before that first workout, and then replenishing and repairing afterwards, maybe having a small snack going into that second workout, replenishing and repairing with a meal afterwards. So they're kind of, 4 hours a day of practice, they should be eating every opportunity that they have around that. If they're trying to maintain their weight and stay functional and stay at their peak performance, they need to be fueling really frequently throughout the day. Does that help?
It's all helpful. So great. Let's see. Mr. Critario, great last name. Coach Critario. Like, that sounds good. Friday night is typical game night for some sports, I would say. There's game nights every night. But he says, could you take me through breakfast, lunch, and dinner before a 7 p.m. contest?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I'd say early in the day should be kind of as usual. If that athlete has school, I'd want to get a good, good breakfast prior to going to school. Maybe they want to take a mid-morning snack of like a piece of fruit or something like that with them to school for a mid-morning snack. Lunch can be pretty typical. Again, those meals should be probably about 50% of that plate carbohydrates. So the bread, the cereal, the rice, the pasta, that kind of stuff should be included in those meals. And then depending again on that individual athlete, like how long of a time frame did they need before they can not comfortably do their exercise if they've got food in their belly. It's a 7:00 game. I'm guessing they need to be there, before 6:00 to start getting dressed and getting ready for that event. I would say if you can use like that 2 to 3 hour window prior to 7:00. So maybe like a 4:00 meal. And then again, it's that individual's preference, like how much food can they handle at that time frame. If it's, closer to that 3 hours, I'd say it could probably be a pretty decent, meal. Again, 50% of that coming from those carbohydrates. And then of course, hydrating throughout that whole day, a lot, making sure that that athlete, when they go to the bathroom, that their urine is almost clear. We don't want it to be dark or, very few voids throughout the day. So hydrating throughout the day as well.
Yeah, I like that you said about the urine, because that's one very easy way to find out if you are dehydrated. It's if you need to have more water. It's how dark is your urine. Take a look, athlete. Let me know.
Yeah, and if you're not going at all to take a look, then you need to drink more water.
Yeah. Okay. There's some in the chat. Let's see. Do we need to worry about athletes that are gluten-free?
Do you need to worry about athletes that are gluten-free? If someone is gluten-free because they need to be due to a diagnosis or certain sensitivity issues, they should be pretty well aware of that. And they can still meet their needs, still fill half of that plate with carbohydrate choices of gluten-free options. So, as long as they're aware of it, then I still think that there's enough alternative options that are gluten-free, the rice or the oats or the gluten-free bread and cereal and that kind of thing that can help support them to meet their needs. So it's good to be aware of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I guess last one. Ryan says, what is the best timing and meal composition following a competition or practice?
The best timing, sorry, can you read it again?
It says, so like timing and what should the meal be following a competition or like a tough practice?
Okay, got it. So the timing would be as soon as you can comfortably eat, I would recommend you do so. And sometimes it's a matter of, it's tough to eat the food right after. I mean, it doesn't have to be within 10 minutes or anything, but probably within that 30 to 45-minute window, I would try to get some kind of food or beverage into your system to help start that repair and that replenishing process. So that's where that chocolate milk can come in kind of handy, or maybe like a Greek yogurt and some fruit, something a little bit lighter within that 30 to 45-minute window. And then I would follow up within 2 to 3 hours for a little bit more substantial balanced meal. So again, like that, pork chop and that potatoes and salad and a little bit of broccoli or something like that within that 2 to 3 hour window.
Well, and that's it.
That's it.
You're so awesome, Casey.
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining us today. There's a lot of great stuff going on in the chat. People are very impressed, and you shared so much great knowledge with us. How can people get in touch with you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can reach out to me on my socials. I've got a Facebook page and an Instagram page, and that information will be in the resource that James provides. But I will tell you it's inspire.health.wellness.rd. So that's kind of a mouthful. So look at the resource guide. But reach out to me, send me a message. I'd be happy to chat with you. If you are in my neck of the woods in the northern UP region of Michigan, or in the Wisconsin Green Bay area, I have resources that I can direct you to if you're looking for individual sports nutrition consults. So I know a lot of you are spread all over the country, so you can't necessarily do that. But I'd be happy to answer your questions if you reach out to me on my socials and go from there. So thanks for having me. This was really fun. I had a good time. I hope you all learned something today.
I definitely did. Thank you so much, Casey.